Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, this is a video that has been highly requested by everyone who watches me, and it is going to be my setup on how I play Kaizo, and the controller is my custom hitbox, and why I have decided to switch from a Super Famicom controller to a custom hitbox. All right, first things first. I am running a Super NT with an SD2 SNES. I was playing Kaizo for the past 2 years with a Super Famicom controller, and now currently I am using a custom hitbox made by Jason's Customs. This is my own custom layout. The way I designed the buttons was I literally just had Caitlin take a picture of my hand on a piece of paper, and I put it in Photoshop and put rings around my fingertips and spaced them out just a little bit and sent it in as an overlay. Why am I playing on hitbox? Why am I trying to go against the grain? Why am I doing keyboard? Why did I switch to keyboard? So if anyone in here has played Kaizo, they understand what an up pipe is, what, you know, missing a door is, or dropped inputs, and how much of a pain in the ass it is whenever you're playing, and no one's immune to it. It happens to everybody. But when it came to the Super Famicom controller, what bothered me the most is whenever I would get up piped to where I would hit the pipe and not go into it, or if I ever threw an item by accident, but my finger was pressed for certain on this controller, I got fed up. I got fed up. I like to speedrun Kaizo, and I like to speedrun competitively, and it really pissed me off when I would be on a very good pace of a speedrun and it felt out of my control. And I know it's common, player blames the controller, and granted, that's exactly what I'm doing, but it really did feel out of my control. After watching Twitch Rivals, I think it was 2018 with Mega Man 11, there was a speedrunner who I think he won 3rd or 4th place or something. He was actually speedrunning Mega Man 11 on a keyboard, which put it in my head back then. And, you know, I was asking around if it was a common thing that people played on keyboard, and I heard of a couple names. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but there are people who play Kaizo on a keyboard, and they are out there. They do exist. It's not just like this random thing. When it comes to fighting games, Smash Brothers, Street Fighter, whatever it is, you see every really high level player, they have their own custom controller really dialed into their settings and how they like it. You know, whether it's the buttons actuate a little bit more than others, or, you know, an analog stick has notches built into, you know, pushing up. So, you know, they'll have like a joystick have notches built around the ring, so that way they can get consistent diagonals and other things like that. So, you know, it jumped into my head of like, well, fuck, why don't I just get a custom controller? You know, like this is something I do full time. I'm a full-time streamer. Just why not? It's a good investment. I asked around the community first because I didn't want to be breaking any speedrun rules. You know, I didn't want to break section 5, code 3, clause 2, or whatever it is. And I just asked, you know, like if I got a hitbox and had it custom, would this be allowed in a speedrun setting? And the answers I got were all positive. They said no macros, no turbo. That's all that really matters when it comes to a custom controller. You know, you can't have one button on here act as 2 buttons essentially, and then no turbo because turbo. On this side is the D-pad, on this side is XYAB. And I have them actually color-coded based on the Super Famicom. As you see here, the 2 bottom buttons are actually 30 millimeter. On this side, it's cherry switches, and on this side, it is Sanwa. The reason behind that is actually when I first got this, it was actually posing the exact same problem. These buttons were actually lifting off, actually way worse than the Super Famicom was, to where I would be throwing items and losing out on cape, actually more. And it actually stressed me out because, you know, this is no cheap investment. So I reached out to the guy who made it, and he said that actually that's the way the Sanwas are supposed to work. They're working as intended. And I was like, oh, well, that's good to know. So how do I fix it? And It was actually the board that's in this Hitbox is called a Brooks. It's a Brooks board, or it's a Brooks retro board, I believe it's called. And basically the firmware, it makes it to where the buttons, they are very, very sensitive, because when it comes to fighting games, you want the buttons to actually lift off as quickly as they can, so that way you could spam, because, you know, fighting is, you know, actually I don't know very much about fighting games, but that's what the guy told me. So he sent me a firmware patch, and I also got cherry switches just for these 4 buttons, so that way they replicated the keyboard feel, because I was thinking about doing this at first, but when I looked into how much it cost, I wanted to make sure that it was an investment that wasn't just a fling. So I played on keyboard for 2 months, and I really liked it. I really, really liked it. And if I was able to just find a keyboard that could plug into the Super NT, I would have. But even on Hitbox, the website that smells like the Smash boxes and all those things, they don't have a Hitbox that just plugs right into a Super Nintendo, which would bear problems hypothetically if I ever did get a run into GDQ or anything like that, because they do not accept runs on emulator. I played Kaizo on keyboard for 2 months on emulator, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I didn't struggle once with dropped inputs. If anything, it was because my own error. And that's the whole purpose behind this, is I wanted to take all the error and be able to literally focus it inward. You know, like if I'm gonna be playing Kaizo competitively, I want to be able to blame myself and not the hardware. If it's the hardware's fault, then, you know, that's you put all the blame on yourself for not being skilled enough to do some to achieve something. When I did play on keyboard, a lot of people were asking me what were my keybinds. I would just use WAD. And because, you know, your thumb, if you kind of scrunch your fingers towards WASD like this, you know, your thumb is kind of scrunched in there. So I use the space bar. So my fingers would be placed like WAS or WAD space bar, and then shift would actually be the left bumper on the controller. And then on this side, it would be the number pad, which would be my middle finger was on 8, which is the B button. We have 6, which is spin jump on the Super Famicom. And then 4 and this right arrow key were X and Y. Were X and Y. And then obviously enter was the right bumper, because there are also obstacles that require you to hit L and R, not just one or the other. That was my button setup for that. And it was cool. I really liked it. I didn't really care for the emulator. The emulation, it would have a little bit of lag, and I could really tell when I went from playing on Super NT for over a year now to then playing on emulator and then switching right back. You could really feel the difference, and it's something small, but those small little changes when it comes to Kaizo, they really, really matter. People always ask me too of how come I have up on the thumb and not up on here? And it was just something I kind of followed suit with the fighting game community. A lot of the fighting game community, when they have a hitbox, they have this be down because it allows them to pull off Hadokens with quarter turns. And yeah, I just followed suit, thought it was cool, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. It actually has a cool little Ethernet dongle. And that's actually how it plugs into anything. And right here, it has a little safety switch so it doesn't ever get pulled out. It actually has a double harness to where I can't pull it out unless I push on the bottom and push on the metal tab up top. This thing is made of stainless steel. It is super fucking heavy. Like, this thing is, I want to say, at least 12 pounds. Pros and cons. I genuinely do not believe that there is any con besides the learning curve. To me, it just makes sense that having individual control of all 4 cardinal directions allows you to have better control of Mario in comparison to a D-pad. And I guess we won't know until more people start picking it up. Oh, another thing real quick, because people are probably going to ask about this. Tofu, how come, what about left right? You can hold left right. There's this board actually has firmware that does not allow the opposite cardinal directions to be pressed at the same time. If I am holding left and I tap right, it will neutral the D-pad. If I'm holding up or if I'm holding down and I'm holding up, it will favor up. But yeah, if you guys have any more questions regarding the hitbox, I'll be here. Twitch.tv/NobleTofu. Yeah, see you guys on Twitch.